Alison Rosen. Alison Rosen is your new best friend. Alison, with her good times never end. Alison Rosen, doing the wavy pencil dance again. Alison's your new best friend.
Hey everyone. Hi. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Alison Rosen is your new best friend. I'm very excited to have on the show today actor, writer, producer Melissa Gilbert. She starred as Laura Ingalls Wilder on Little House on the Prairie from 1974 to 1984. During the show's run, she appeared in The Diary of Anne Frank and The Miracle Worker, which I must have watched 800 times. She went on to do voice work and musical theater. She received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, was president of the Screen Actors Guild for 4 years, and competed on season 14 of Dancing with the Stars. She's written a memoir, a children's book, a cookbook, and even run for Congress. Now she has a production company with her husband, Timothy Busfield, and Jeff Daniels, and they've released their first film, Guest Artist. Hello, welcome.
Hi. Boy, hearing all of that makes me very tired.
Are you tired?
No, actually, no. I have not infinite, but I have a lot of energy. So it takes a lot to get me tie-tie.
So Guest Artist, did I get that right? Is that the first film that you guys have released?
It is. It's our first film together since we formed our company, Grand River Productions. Tim and I were living in Michigan. And Tim is from Michigan, and Jeff is a Michigander, and they had been friends since youth in New York. They met when they were kids and had Michigan in common, and were in the same theater company in New York City. And so Jeff came over one day, and we sat down and we were talking about how frustrating the film and television industry could be, and how we wanted to make our own content, and how, Tim and I had been doing these little sort of independent short films and little things for YouTube and stuff, and discovered that there was a way to do this without pushing a boulder up a hill and having a giant crew and a huge inflated budget. And so Jeff was really interested in that and said, well, why don't let's look at something we can do. And he's an incredibly prolific playwright. And so we went to his catalog, and he chose to do Guest Artist first. And then he wrote it into a screenplay, and I raised the money, and Tim directed and produced. We produced together. Jeff starred. It was a real family affair. Mm-hmm. And now it's out, and it's, been such an incredibly interesting experience getting this thing done and out there. And especially now, releasing a movie during a global pandemic is, not optimal, but there's not a lot of competition. So
Right. If it weren't the pandemic, how would things be different in terms of what you'd go through in releasing the movie?
Well, we would have been in more theaters. It would have had more time to, build audience appreciation. We would have been able to red carpet and have premieres in different cities and do press junkets and all of that. So this really did it put a kibosh on all of that. So we had to, it's very apropos, though, that this company that decided to do things in a new-ish way, our way, would have to then also release the film. And our distributor, IndieCan, has been fantastic through all of this. And, it's a struggle. And yet at the same time, now everybody can just watch it in their homes if they want to,
mm-hmm.
which I don't mind. It's a small film. It's beautiful on the big screen, but it's also beautiful on a television.
Do you feel like you have a personal relationship with the story?
I do. I have, my relationship with the story is different, simply because in this particular instance, in our company, we all wear a bunch of different hats and do a bunch of different things depending upon what project we're working on. One of us will write, one of us will direct, one of us will act, we'll all produce. It kind of goes back and forth. Mm-hmm. So on this one, I was very much, my hat was primarily being a producer. So I had to come at it in a very analytical way, and raising the money for it, and then finding our production offices, getting that up and running, staffing. I did, location scouting, secured the locations, there really is only one major mm-hmm. central location. And then
the action takes place primarily in a train depot. That is a real train station, right?
It is. It's a train station in Jeff's hometown in Michigan where he lives. So he was 20 minutes from work. Mm-hmm. And then, we were getting everything up and running. And Tim and I were, at that time, we had moved to New York City, and or we were back and forth between the two. And while we were in New York City for one of our chunky stays, I booked an off-Broadway play. And so I called the guys, got them on the phone and said, what do I do? And they said, we got this. Go do the play. So I wasn't on the set when they were shooting. Then I got involved again in post-production and was at Tim's side through the entire editing process and having a lot of input in that and the scoring. Our composer is Jeff's son, Ben.
I especially loved, I actually went, so I watched it last night, and then I really loved the song, the closing credits song at the very end. And so, and I knew it was Ben Daniels. And then, I went and looked it up, and I ended up finding a bunch of like wedding pictures of Ben and his wife on the Knot, that wedding website. Yes. So I feel intimately acquainted with the musicians of the movie.
That's so great. And then we had his son, Jeff's son, Luke, was a camera operator, worked in the sound department. My stepson and Tim's son, Willie Busfield, was our director of photography. He's a really talented, much sought after fashion DP in New York City. And my son, Michael, my youngest, Michael Boxleitner, was Jeff's stand-in. So it really was a family affair for us.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
What was the off-Broadway play you did?
It was the second one I did. It was with the Irish Rep. It was The Dead 1904. It was an immersive, interactive telling of James Joyce's The Dead. Mm-hmm. And I did that 2 years in a row, right around Christmas time. And it was in the Irish American Historical Society townhouse on Fifth Avenue. And the guests would come in and we serve dinner and there's live music and we dance with them. And then we move the play from room to room and they follow. And
wow.
They're in it with us. So it was an amazing experience. And I've been isolated now as we all have for these many months. The thought of doing a play, let alone an immersive play with food and an audience, is like I'm so lucky I got to do that when I did, because I don't think we'll see stuff like that for a very long time, if ever. Who knows?
Right. Right now you're in upstate New York, right?
Yes.
And yes. I know that you have chickens and vegetables.
Yes.
Tell me about the chickens, because I have a fantasy. I had chickens when I was a little kid, and I have I'm in Burbank now, which it's not exactly like chicken land, but I have a fantasy of having my own egg-laying chickens.
We have, for my birthday this year, we knew we were going to get chickens, and we knew we were going to get a coop and eventually, do all of these things. And then the virus hit, and it seemed more important than ever to try and be remotely self-reliant if possible, because we still don't know where all of this is headed. Mm-hmm. What we hadn't anticipated was that so much of this would be DIY. So we built the coop, we built the chicken run, we built the bear fence, the electric fence that goes around the chicken run, because we have bears and raccoons and hawks and eagles up here, and bobcats and coyotes and snakes, you name it. And then we built the garden, we built the raised beds, we built the fence around that, the deer fence, and then put in the special sensor sprinklers that go off if anything climbs in. But we did it all with this like hardware cloth, which is, it's like mesh, like really nasty metally mesh on the bottom of everything, and then built from there. So it was arduous, but so rewarding. And so my birthday, I got my chickens. And we started doing research into finding chicks, and we were not the only people in America to have this idea.
Yes, I heard there was like a run on chicks. You could not get them.
Couldn't get chicks. We finally found a chicken farm in New Jersey, about an hour and a half away, and they offered a straight run, which is a not sexed run of these chickens, and the breed is called Death Layers. I like to think they're a biker gang.
That's very tough for tiny, cute little chicks.
It is. And the reason they're called death layers is that most chickens go through menopause a couple of years or a year before they pass. And these don't. They lay eggs until they die. So we got...
Still a very morose name.
Yes.
We could also have called them life layers, although that sounds like weirdly religious. But
lifelong layers? I don't know. Yeah, that is weird. And so we brought them home, all the 8 of them. And a few months later, we noticed that we had 5 roosters and 2 hens. So this last, about 3 weeks ago, the guy who sold us those chickens let us come in exchange, and he gave us 2 pullets, which are hens that aren't laying yet but aren't babies. Mm-hmm. So they were the same age as the death layers. We kept 1 rooster and 2 death layers. Dr. Biggie Fauci is the rooster, and Henny and Penny are the death layer girls. And then we got a black French Moranian with the feathery feet.
Oh, yeah.
Her name is Coco. And they gave us a cream leg bar. She's all white, so her name is Cotton. And then we got 4 hen chicks. So we have 4 babies in the kitchen right now.
Oh.
And their breed they're called 55 flowery hens. And they have the funniest little personalities. We're having the best time with these guys. And so I figure the first few hens will probably start laying in September. And the little babies will be a couple months behind that. But in the meantime, the garden's flourishing. We have tomatoes, cucumbers, green beans. I made pickles yesterday. I'm living Little House on the Prairie here. Green peppers, red bell peppers, red onions, celery, zinnias, strawberries, watermelons, and all kinds of herbs. And I thought, I enjoyed fresh vegetables and fruits. I've never tasted anything like the stuff that's growing in our garden ever.
How are your spirits during all this? Because hearing all that, I'm like, oh wow, you are really making the most of it. I feel like all I'm doing is just the bare minimum.
In the beginning, when we first came up here on March 13th, it was still really cold and snowy. It didn't, the last snow I think was mid-May, end of May. So it was really, really cold still in March. So we just kind of hunkered in, which I'm incredibly good at. Mm-hmm. I think I've discovered that for all this energy and all these things I do in my life, I'm inherently kind of a lazy person. So at first it was just about carbs and movies. Mm-hmm. And just enjoying our company together, the 2 of us, and having weekly Zoom calls with the kids. And, it felt very still and peaceful. And then as the seasons changed, we just started to get so active with this stuff. I worry about what will be, and I worry about my kids and grandkids, and I don't know, none of us knows what the future holds with any of this stuff. But on the other side of that, I'm really enjoying having this kind of quiet, peaceful time with Tim, with my husband. And, our place is so far removed that we have internet, but it's satellite. So we can't stream. So until we got this office that's in the little tiny town near us and got high-speed internet, I hadn't seen Tiger King, or I read about this stuff, but I don't know what any of it means. And so now we're sort of back in the land of the living and working more, and he's getting ready to go start shooting his series on ABC. And so we're getting back to life, but I'm not ready to leave here yet. And
where do you normally live?
We have an apartment in New York City. That was that tone on my computer that I can't turn off.
The mysterious ding. It's okay.
Hold on 1 second. My husband's using the printer. Can you give me a second?
Yeah, sure.
Hey, sweetie. What are you printing?
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Is it making? Hi, sorry.
Hi, no worries.
Oh shoot, where were we?
I was saying, where do you normally live?
Oh, okay. So we have an apartment in New York City, our little pied-à-terre in New York City, and then we've had this place up in the Catskills for a couple of years now. And so we just come up here kind of to get away, or come up almost every weekend year-round. And we converted this little hunting cabin into a year-round place. We put in heat, we gutted it, we put on a new roof, we changed the kitchen, made a new bathroom, put in all new plumbing, insulated, so that it'd be more comfortable. Not anticipating living here full time. And now we still have the apartment in the city, but we're just not there. We went back to pick up the youngest kid who lives in New York City to get him out of there for a while. We put an RV on the property for our quarantining friends so they can come up and stay there for 2 weeks.
That's smart.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also gave us an extra couple of bathrooms, which is key since in our cabin, the bathroom is just off the kitchen. Not really conducive to privacy and food and and so now we've been working so much on the house and at the house. I mean, we went back to the city for that and went back to the city for a doctor's appointment. I have a dentist appointment in September, but other than that, unless Tim starts filming in New York City, there's no reason for us to be there.
Yeah, I have a husband and I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and we're in, LA area for work theoretically, but this whole pandemic has made me realize right now there's not really any reason we need to be here. I have all sorts of friends who were in New York or in LA and who've escaped to various other places where they have more land and they're more in touch with nature. And I don't actually see us doing that, but I see the appeal of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, because we're in a really wonderful position now. Our kids are all grown. They're all living on their own. So we don't have little ones at home. I don't know what I would do. I really don't. More power to you with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old in a quarantine, during a pandemic without being able to go to the normal places and do the normal activities. Parents, in my opinion, are saints anyway, by and large, especially stay-home parents. And now everyone's a stay-home parent,
right.
And I don't know how I would have handled it.
Yeah, it's well, thank you. It's tough. We are getting through. Speaking of being a little kid, you started acting super duper young. How old were you when you started?
My first job was a commercial I did when I was 2. So I was really, really little. And then my first episodic television, I think I was around 6 when I did Gunsmoke. And then a lot of different commercials and episodes of stuff here and there. And then Little House when I was 9.
So you never actively chose it. Did you feel like you had chosen it?
No. I mean, I don't think, I too marching into my parents and said, I want to be an actor now. But it was abundantly clear to my family's all in the entertainment industry anyway. It was made very clear to them that that's where I was headed. When I was about 2-ish, my father, who was a really fantastic stand-up comic, dancer, actor, musician, writer, he was doing a date. He was playing, doing his comedy act in Hawaii. And they did this family fashion show with celebrities and their kids. And my dad was in it and I was asked to be in it too. And so and my mom, and we were meant to walk down this ramp and turn around and come back behind a curtain. And so we did, and they went back behind the curtain. My mom and dad were talking and they heard the audience applauding and cheering, and they turned around and I was gone. I was down center stage, blowing kisses and dancing and taking bows. And that's when they went, okay, all righty, we're in trouble. And luckily, as I grew and aged, I don't remember not loving what I did. It was always a joyful experience for me. I was very lucky to be working with some really extraordinary people who were very mindful of allowing me to remain a child, but then also respecting me as a peer. And I grew up on a set that embraced kids being kids. When we were outside, we had outside activities to do when we weren't shooting, and school was really important. And I've always loved my job, so much so that it oftentimes doesn't even feel like a job.
Have you ever gone to real school?
Oh yeah. I went to a private school in LA. I went to the Buckley School.
Okay.
And that school goes nursery through 12th. And so I started in the 60s when it was on Doheny still. And that's the school that I went to all the way through high school graduation. And then when I was working, I would correspond my work with the school. But oftentimes during our hiatus on Little House on the Prairie, I wasn't working. And so I would go back to regular school. And I still have friends from my class.
What was that transition like?
Going back from work to school?
And then going back to work?
It was weird for me. It was a little bit awkward, but also one of the things that was really hard about it was, my teeth were legendarily, they were Bucky Beaver. And so they didn't have braces or retainers or anything in the 1800s. So I would have like super braces in between on hiatus. So I had a neck gear. And that
I remember those.
And I was already kind of dorky, and I was not like the rest of the kids because I was on television. So I had my little group of friends, but I was nowhere near a popular girl in school. And, the neck gear did not help.
Did you wish you were popular?
At the time I did. I look back at my entire life and all of the wonderful, terrific times and all of the difficult times, but I wouldn't change any of it because right now is really good, even with everything going on around us.
So when you say super braces, was it like they were trying to do what would normally take X amount of months in a shorter? So that just sounds so painful.
It hurt. It did hurt, but it had to happen. So,
Yeah.
And then I had a lot of stuff behind my teeth. Like I had a wire underneath my bottom teeth, and I had brackets on the back teeth, and I still had the neck gear even when the braces came off, and then they would go back on again. It was not pleasant, but well worth it, because had I had to go through life with the teeth that I had at that time, it would not be pretty right now.
Now you have perfect teeth.
I do. There's thousands of dollars in this face right now.
I know that you have talked about feeling like you got to a certain point and there was suddenly pressure put on the way you looked.
Yes.
And you have also, in 2018, you announced that you are going to go natural.
Yeah.
Where are you with all of that now? Like, do you feel like you had body dysmorphia for a time?
I don't know that I had necessarily body dysmorphia. I had a lot of pressure from the industry that I was in to look a certain way and be a certain way. There's a lot of pressure in our business, and there's a lot of pressure outside of our business. I often point out, if you drive on any kind of long distance drive, as you come into a big city, you see McDonald's, Taco Bell, freeze the fat, facelift, Wendy's, liposuction. And it's mind boggling to me.
There's so many mixed messages. Yeah.
And I decided, having gone through trying to fit into everyone's mold of what I should look like, I aside from the health stuff, especially with the breast implants, I just wanted that stuff out. And once those came out, the implants came out permanently, then the next step was no Botox, no fillers, no nothing. And now I've stopped coloring my hair completely. I'm letting it go gray. And actually all of this works really well considering where we're at. If I had to keep maintaining all of that stuff from home by myself, I would be out of my mind. And I feel good. I feel healthy. And I feel strong for someone my age. And I look in the mirror and go, okay, great.
What was there any pushback from your representation or from anyone when you decided to, get the implants out and to stop getting Botox or filler or anything like that?
No, I got nothing but support from them. Nothing but support. And I grew up in a very glamorous family. My mom's side, the women on that side of the family are like the Gabors. It's insane what these people look like. And my sister my little sister Sarah sort of blazed the no makeup, I'm not going that way trail for me. And, there were a couple times in my late 20s, early 30s, where I would show up at family functions with the baby, my son Dakota, who was very little at the time, and no makeup. And my grandmother would say, "You're so beautiful. How come you're not wearing makeup?" Wait, that doesn't make sense, but okay. You need rouge.
You have been open about having had a nose job.
Oh, yeah.
I'm wondering, after you got the nose job and then later after you got the breast implants, how did you feel after those surgeries? I don't mean physically. I mean like the results of them. How did it make you feel?
The nose was a big deal. I felt more confident, I think, for sure. I've been people had been shadowing and contouring my nose for years, and I hated having all that stuff on my face. So once I got that done, and I was not shy about it, all my friends knew, I'm going to go get my nose done. I'm getting my nose done. I even went out. I even showed up at a party at the Playboy Mansion with the bandage on. I don't care. I'm an open book that way. There's no secret to it. After I got my implants in initially, I felt pretty great. It was in between babies. After the first baby, nursed for a really long time, and I was really insecure, and I did feel better. But then as time went on, I just kept looking at this body going, whose body is this? This is not what my body's meant to look like. And the strangest thing happened when I finally had the implants removed. I'd been carrying a little weight around with me since I'd moved to Michigan and discovered how to make a tater tot hot dish. As soon as those implants came out, I lost like 15 pounds. It just fell off. It's like my body went, this is what you are. You're more athletic. You're not voluptuous. Go be this person, please.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, it was weird. It was unexpected.
And it was 50, and it wasn't, was some of that the weight of the implants or just
No,
actually?
it didn't weigh that much.
I don't know how they work. For all I know, they're very heavy. Guess that makes sense that they probably wouldn't. What was your relationship with your parents like?
My relationship with my parents was it was good. When my parents were together, my parents divorced, I think, when I was about 6. But my relationship with my dad was terrific. He was a really wonderful, fun, very fair, reasonable father. And he was very much a part of my life, even after my parents got divorced and after my mother remarried. My dad was still always around until he died when I was 11. And that was mind-bogglingly devastating. It shifts. Losing a dad at that age just shifts everything. Mm-hmm. It's just, there's not even really words to describe it. My relationship with my mother has, over the course of the years, it can be prickly at times. Mothers and daughters are, gosh, this is why I'm so grateful I have 4 sons. We've had our moments and our disagreements. And at the end of the day now, here we are, where we are during this pandemic. And even if I was in Los Angeles, I still couldn't go see her and hug her. And I want to more than ever. And I miss her because we've reached this really wonderful, peaceful place where we're not butting heads. And I don't feel in my family, these skeletons in the familial closet will come popping out. And it would always go back to my mother having kept the stuff, very important facts of my life from me. And my reaction has always been, initially just hurt and anger. Mm-hmm. And rightly so. So now here we are this many years later, and a lot of that, so much of that has softened. And now I realize that was all just her way of doing things. And it's not my way of doing things. And I'm grateful for what I learned from that so that I don't pass it on to my kids. And I'm grateful that I've been in a position and had a great therapist for a really long time who helped me to find a way to not repeat a lot of that stuff.
Can I ask what kind of things she kept from you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, the reality, my father's passing when I was 11, my brother Jonathan was 8. Our father had a stroke a year before he died. And so when he died, we were told that he'd had another stroke in his sleep and died in his sleep.
Mm.
And then when I was in I think about 45, I was on the phone with my sister, who is not my father's daughter. She's my mom and my stepdad's daughter. And my memoir was about to come out. And everybody was like, my mom hated it. And my sister was worried. And she called me on the phone and she said, I'm really scared about this, that it's going to cause a big rift in the family. And, you're telling all of these truths. And she said, and I have to tell you something. And I said, what do you have to tell me? And she told me that when her father had died about 5 years before, she said, on his deathbed, he confessed something to me about your dad. And I said, well, what is it? And she started to cry. And I said, honey, what is it? She said, Melissa, your father shot himself.
Oh my God.
And yeah, and they were screaming.
Yeah.
I scared the crap out of my youngest, Michael, who was sitting next to me, and my husband, Bruce, at the time, Bruce. And it was like not having the rug pulled out from under me, but having the entire planet pulled out from under me. And when I confronted my mother and said, how could you not have told me? And she just kept coming back at me with, well. And I said, well, wait. She said, you were 11. I said, yeah, but then I was 18 and I was 20 and I was 30 and I played a woman who committed suicide and you sat next to me in the movie and you didn't lean over and go, by the way, every opportunity. And she was so not open to what I was experiencing emotionally. And she actually said to me on the phone, look, Melissa, I can't do this. Frankly, I just forgot. And I couldn't get any straight answers from anyone. And everyone who had been there, my stepdad at the time, Harold, was dead. My grandmother, who was there, had dementia, and my mom kept it. There's literally nobody in the family knew. And nobody could give me any information. So I hired PIs, and I asked them to get my father's death certificate and the coroner's report, but not with any photographs. Because for me, the most important thing, even if it's painful, is to live in truth as much and as often as possible. Mm-hmm. It's much less unsettling. And so I got the report, and my father, after his first stroke, had been under the care of the VA and in uncontrollable pain, and nobody was doing anything to help him. And it had been a year, and he couldn't work. He couldn't perform, which was his second greatest love aside from us kids. And he kept saying he was going to kill himself. He was going to kill himself. He was going to kill himself. And he got a gun. And he did. And when they did the toxicology report, there was nothing in his body but Tylenol. So nobody did anything. Mm-hmm. And having the knowledge of what he had gone through and understanding it helped me a lot in healing from that. But it was a very, very hard couple of years after that. And I don't think I spoke to my mom. We really got into it, and I didn't speak to her for a year. And then, gradually things started to get better. And then a few years ago, I found out that my father had 2 daughters before me from 2 different wives. One I knew about, one I had no idea about, that my mom knew about. And then there was all this family subterfuge that kind of separated me from them. And I blew up at her again about that. And just tell me the truth. I can handle anything, just as long as there's truth. So now that's all done. And these are now the facts of my life. So what am I going to do with them? Carry resentment forever? And, all these things were done for a multitude of reasons, but the core of that for my mother was to protect me from any kind of hurt or harm. It may not have been the right way to do it, but it was her way to do it. And I appreciate that.
And then I imagine probably shame about not having told you the truth and not knowing how to undo it.
Yeah. And I have a big mouth, I don't have a necessarily short fuse, but when I'm lied to, then that's a real trigger. That's a problem for me.
I'm relating intensely to all of that because I also feel the most important thing is the truth and living in the truth. And some of my greatest pain is feeling gaslit or feeling like my reality is not being validated. Where do you think that desire to live in the truth comes from for you?
I think it comes from this sort of inherent, as a kid, knowing that something's not right. When my father died, we were told he died, and then there was absolutely no discussion of it. The decision was made that we were not to go to the funeral. The decision was made that we were not to go see his things or have any of his things or choose what we wanted to take of his. It was just sort of this, it'll be better for them if they don't feel. And, part of that, I think in my head is, well, maybe because you didn't want to be upset watching me be upset. Mm-hmm. But that's not going to help me at all right now. So I think it's a real mistake to underestimate people's instincts. And instinctively, I knew something was wrong.
Yeah. When did you grieve your father, if you weren't really allowed to then?
A lot of the weeping on Little House on the Prairie after season 2 was grief coming out in at least a constructive way. But I didn't really know how to process grief really well and then years and years later, my grandfather was dying, and my mother's father. And it was such a different experience. Like, we were all there. We were with him for the weeks before and the hours before. And there was this wonderful funeral, and the family was kind of together. And I started having these terrible anxiety attacks and panic attacks because this was so different from any other grieving experience I'd ever watched my family go through. And I couldn't understand why him, not my dad, why, it really knocked me for a loop. It's amazing the kind of, I call it yard trauma that we get from childhood that we carry with us. Well, I'll tell you, one of the results of not being able to grieve is, I think I may have let my kids over grieve. Like, had a pet mouse that died, and we had a funeral for the mouse, and we talked about the mouse and how do we feel about the mouse, and it was a mouse. Worms, or if there's a dead bug, and the kids were, I wanted to make sure that they could live with their feelings and have their feelings. I think they'll tell you I let them overfeel a bit.
They feel that way?
I don't know. I would love to be a fly on the wall in their therapy sessions to hear what I did wrong. I have yet for them to, aside from the adolescent, you work too much stuff that I got. Now they're past it. I don't hear anything, Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's better that I don't.
Yeah, it's funny when you try so hard to be a really good parent, but you also know that your kids are going to be in therapy complaining about you one day anyway.
Yeah, of course. My mother gave me too many choices. She told me I could do anything, and now I can't.
You were adopted, right?
Yes.
Did you always know that?
I always knew I was adopted. Again, there was a fairy tale about, my adoption story that my father was, what did she tell me? My father was, gosh, I don't even remember what she said. My mother was a ballerina, and my father was, I don't know, something equally as romantic. And they just realized that they were too young to have a child, and they put me up for adoption. And the reality was that my birth father and birth mother were married to other people and each had 3 children, fell in love, ran off on a motorcycle trip, and conceived me in the middle of the desert, which I think is infinitely much more cool than being the daughter of a prima ballerina who just didn't want to give up her stupid career. it had so much more meaning. And then they even married after I was born.
Oh, wow.
So
So-
they had a love story of their own.
And finding out that they had married, did that cause you pain? That they had given you up for adoption?
No. I've never felt. I found my birth family, at least the birth father's side. They separated many, many years later, and she passed away in 1980 before I ever searched. And I really had no desire to look until I had my first baby. And I looked at his face and went, oh my God, he looks like me. I thought I looked like my family all this time, but it was just mannerisms. This was like physically his eyebrows and his lip and his forehead. It was bizarre. And so I knew there were other people out there who looked like me, and I wanted to find them. But in no way did I want them to take me back, or did I want them to replace the family that I had. It was more just curious and embracing this. I tell people I don't have a family tree. I have a family shrub.
I read, I don't know if it's true though, but I read that you had, at a certain point, you had a rift with Michael Landon. Is that right?
I wouldn't call it a rift. He, growing up, we were all very close. Our families were really close. We socialized together, not even off the set. We vacationed together in Hawaii every spring break.
Oh, wow.
Our parents did New Year's Eves together. I slept over to that house. His daughter, Leslie, and Michael also went to the Buckley School, so we all went to school together. They slept over at my house. We were all a very tight-knit group. So when Michael's marriage broke up, when he split up with my Auntie Lynn, Leslie and Michael's mother, and left her for a stand-in on the Little House set, when I had seen the kind of, at 16, I saw the hints of this romance, and I'd go home and tell my mom, she'd go, "You're crazy. He loves Auntie Lynn. They're never getting divorced." So when that happened, there was the usual, well, now who are we friends with?
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was really close with Auntie Lynn, and I was really close with Mike and Leslie, and they were devastated. And so that's where my focus went. And then Mike moved to Malibu with Cindy, and then they got married, and it was a whole other family. And it was like, that's more or less what happened.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, a confrontation or a rift or anything. It's just, it was more of a drift than a rift.
Right.
But we came back together at Leslie's wedding, which was about, I want to say 7 or 8 months before Michael passed away, and certainly before he'd been diagnosed. And so we saw each other. We had a great hug and a really nice chat, and then kept making plans to get together. And then he got sick, and so the plans got pushed, and the plans got pushed, and the plans got pushed. But I did get to go and spend a day with him. What it turned out to be a week before he passed away, and it was the same warm, loving relationship that I had known. And I had an opportunity to walk through that grief normally.
Good.
Grief. Yeah.
What was being the president of SAG like?
Tiring. It's very, it's first of all, it's a volunteer job. There's no salary.
Mm-hmm.
But people assume that there's a salary. So, and then also they don't want the number one SAG cop on their set. So trying to work while being the president of the Screen Actors Guild was nearly impossible.
I imagine that's something that you didn't realize until you were in the position?
Yeah, exactly. I also didn't realize how divisive the internal political world of Screen Actors Guild was until I had gotten on the board of directors. And so when I started running for president, it got even worse. And then my election got overturned by one faction in the guild, and it got crazy. It was exhausting and thankless, and at the same time extremely educational and rewarding. I learned so much, not just about our industry and that particular union, but about the labor movement in our country. I was on the executive council of the AFL-CIO, and I learned so much from all the different unions there, and was there after 9/11, and dealing with how we put the country back together again, and having incredible high-level meetings with people I never would have otherwise. And it was an extraordinary time. It was also very frustrating and at times almost impossibly difficult, but I wouldn't trade it for the world, because now when it comes time to negotiate my own deals, I know exactly what I'm doing.
What inspired you to run for president?
I thought I could unify the Guild a bit more. I really wanted to stop the infighting. I honestly believe that a house divided cannot stand. And I thought we were starting to look very weak because of all of the infighting. And I didn't think it was going to put us in a very strong position to negotiate our collective bargaining agreements. And so I felt that it was time for someone to step in who could really, hopefully, change that culture, which I ultimately didn't do, because no one can. And it's still a very divisive union, and it's nuts. I'm just so grateful they finally merged, SAG finally merged with AFTRA, and they've merged the health plans, and especially now.
And then you ran for Congress. Do you think your decision to do that related to having been SAG president? Are those related?
I think they are related. I've always been an activist. I've always stood up for causes that I believe in and my own set of ideals, and oftentimes for candidates that I want to back. I have an aptitude for politics, and I had worked really hard on the gubernatorial election in Michigan, trying to get Mark Schauer elected. And he was running against Rick Snyder. Rick Snyder won. And then, Rick Snyder, the governor who poisoned all of the people in Flint. It was a really terrible, terrible time. So when the party came to me and asked me if I would be willing to run, we had long internal familial conversations, and Tim and I talked till we were blue in the face, but we felt that it was more important for me, that it was important for me to try and help. And so I threw myself into it 100%. And it was really difficult. It's such a strange world. And now we're starting to see it more. We're seeing our leaders and leadership at least be allowed to have personalities and quirks of their own. But still, when I was running, they were telling me how to dress and what to wear and not to be funny. We know you're funny, but they don't need to know you're funny. And I'm like, but that's
why.
There's this mold. I called this person that when I left the house, I would call myself the candidate. When I come home, I'd just be Melissa. I had to put on the suit, literally the suit. Mm-hmm. We were having a fundraiser in a beer hall, and I put on jeans, and my campaign manager said, you're not wearing jeans, are you? Yeah, it's a beer place in Detroit. No, you can't wear jeans. The head of the DCCC is coming. And the emphasis, the real frustration for me was the emphasis on fundraising. You can't get any of the work done because you're constantly having to raise money. And then every 2 years in Congress, it's crazy making. Mm-hmm. And they set these goals for you that you have to meet every quarter. And if you don't, you get less support from the party and from the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the DCCC. Same thing happens on the Republican side. And it has nothing to do with leadership or ideals or beliefs or being for the people or by the people. It's by the pocketbook. And until that changes, the culture of politics will not change.
And how do you do the fundraising? Is that like going to events, and is that making promises, or what is it?
Call time. It's getting lists of phone numbers and sitting for several hours a day and just calling people and asking for money. Something I absolutely loathe, but I decided to make it, to challenge myself to surpass my goals every quarter. And so I would just get on the phone mercilessly and say, I need your help. I blah, 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 and I would sit for hours every day doing call time. It's torture.
Are you calling like notable people or just
all
random
people from all over the place? Notable people, people that I know from the industry, people I've crossed paths with, other politicians, and then just people in the district.
That sounds
Identified as Democratic donors and people who donate and who donate on the regular. It's nuts. I mean, you can get all of these lists. I had this huge list of contacts by the time the thing was over.
That sounds exhausting.
Yeah, it is. It's tedious, is what it is.
Let's take some questions that listeners sent in on Patreon and Twitter. I'm on Patreon, patreon.com/Alison Rosen, bonus materials, behind the scenes content, all that stuff. And, okay, here we go.
When we ask, they send them in. They're wondering how you have been. So thanks so much for answering these questions from our fans.
Whitney C. would like to know, what specific items are your go-tos for ultimate physical comfort?
What specific items are my go-tos for ultimate physical comfort? My jammies and super, super, super soft sheets that are cooling because I'm hot all the time and I'm past menopause, but I've just always been hot anyway. My husband and carbs.
Do you have a favorite carb?
Fried chicken. Don't tell my
Do you say don't tell your chickens?
Yeah, don't tell my chicken.
Snapchat.
Shanna Tyndall would like to know. She says, that's so exciting. I think like many of us, I've been a fan for a long time. So that's in response to knowing you were coming on the show. I'd be curious to know how she experienced the balance between trying to be true to the time period of the Little House books while also addressing the evolution of cultural attitudes during the show's run. Black and Native American characters, for example. Would a show like Little House be as popular today?
You know, I've been amazed during this whole coronavirus thing how there's been this wild resurgence of Little House on the Prairie watching. Mm-hmm. And what people are now realizing that I don't think they realized before was that when we filmed Little House on the Prairie in the 70s, on into the 80s, but in the beginning, in the 70s, our country was just coming out of, we just come out of the Vietnam War. The civil rights movement was at the forefront of everything. All of these vets were coming back addicted to drugs. We were in a horrible recession. There were, gas lines, and it was crazy. And our country was in a bad place. And so a lot of what we were going through as a nation was infused in the stories we were telling. And that's all Michael Landon. He wanted to tell the stories of the African-American experience and about racism and anti-Semitism and chauvinism and the cruelty and the cruel ways with which we have dealt with the Native American peoples. And so those stories and drug addiction and all of it were all interwoven into the show. So absolutely, based on what I'm seeing and hearing now on social media and reading, and people keep wanting to interview me about Little House on the Prairie because people are starting to watch it again. People are getting that again. So yes, I mean, I don't think we can remake Little House on the Prairie now because it stands for itself and the stories are still the same and the message and lessons are still the same.
Shanna also would like to know, what was her favorite role outside of Laura, and would she consider running for political office again?
Gosh, I've had so many diverse and different kinds of roles over the years. I really loved and grew as a person and a performer by leaps and bounds when I played Helen Keller in The Miracle Worker. That was my first foray outside of Little House on the Prairie. And it was, and also my first play. We did it as a play before we did the movie. So it was my first time on stage, and that really changed everything for me. And as for running for political office, I think that time has passed for me. I'm still very much an activist and very much a loudmouth and very involved. But I don't think, I think that the fact that the disc in my neck kind of exploded and forced me into having neurosurgery, making me drop out of the race, was enough of a hint from whatever power it is up there that this is not the right world for me.
And was that from Dancing with the Stars that you had an injury?
I had a neck surgery previously in 2001. I had a spinal fusion. And then after the whiplash and injury from Dancing with the Stars, it just started to degrade the disc below. And so I ended up having to have another fusion surgery. And politics waits for no one. There was no way I was going to be able to stay away from the campaign for 6 weeks and heal.
Yeah. Ulysses Atkins says, Jeff Daniels, he is amazing. Ask Melissa what Jeff was like. Has he talked about Michigan much? I recommend seeing Escanaba into Moonlight.
Jeff is great. He's really wry and funny. Escanaba into Moonlight is a fantastic play that he wrote, and he also shot an independent feature many, many, many years ago based on it that he directed. And the play is done all over the country all the time. It's been done numerous times at my husband's theater in Sacramento. It's a really, really funny play. Jeff is he's very politically conscious, and his beliefs and ideals are all infused into his writing. He's a great musician. He's a really, really wonderful husband, father, and grandfather. He's a good guy.
Amy Freehill would like to know if she could visit another era of American history, which would she choose?
Another era of American history. I think, golly, I don't know. I guess something feels kind of fun about the Roaring 20s before the crash, after the first pandemic, before the stock market crash. Maybe. I don't know. You know what? I don't even have the imagination to come up with that answer, because all I'm hearing in my head is no, now, right now.
Yeah. Don't go back. Lee Brunn says, ask about her sitcom with Rosie O'Donnell, Stand By Your Man. It was great, but for whatever reason, never caught on.
I don't know why I didn't catch on either. I had the best time working on that show with Rosie and Sam McMurray, who's still a friend of ours today, and Rick Hall. It was a fantastic time for me. It was way outside my comfort zone, but absolutely in my bailiwick, because I was raised by all comics and comedy writers. So I was completely content in that world. It was in the beginning of Fox as a network. It hadn't existed before then. Before then, there was just ABC, NBC, and CBS. So they were still trying to find their way, I think, in their programming. But I'd work with Rosie again in a heartbeat. She's one of my favorite people.
David Goldstein says, and these are now questions from Twitter, does she have pandemic tips? There were multiple Little House pandemic episodes. She must have picked up some advice.
Yeah, I got a pandemic tip. Wear a mask.
Yes. And then Stephanie Wilder Taylor would like to know, does she still keep in touch with Alison Ingram? Are they still rivals?
Alison and I are still really close friends. In fact, we were just on a Zoom together for the PBS Television Critics Association Zoom, because American Masters is doing a special in December on Laura Ingalls Wilder. So they had the two of us on. We text on the regular, we email all the time, and she's great. We were never rivals. We've always been friends.
And then lastly, Emily wants to know, how do you feel about Laura Ingalls Wilder's name being taken off the Children's Lit Award?
Her books, Laura Ingalls Wilder's books, will live on regardless of whether her name is on an award or not. And there is some controversy about Laura's depiction of people of color in the books and Native Americans in the books. But we have to also understand that that's where we were then. That's what she grew up with. And her mother, Caroline Ingalls, and it was all based on fear, was terrified of Native Americans and people of color. So that rubbed off on Laura. Laura's daughter, Rose, was a completely different animal. And so, I think we can't get over cancel-y with a lot of this. We have to remember that there's an evolution here. And we've evolved as a people from who we were in the 1700s, 1800s, and 1900s, early 2000s to who we are now. And someday people are going to look back on who we are now and go, God, troglodytes, what were they doing? Cavemen. We've come so far. So it's just another step in the journey.
It was so nice talking to you. Thank you so much. Tell people where to find you, plug. Everyone should go check out Guest Artist, but do your plugs.
Oh my gosh. Well, let's see. Check out Guest Artist. It's available on demand all over the place on iTunes and Apple TV and Direct TV. I mean, just look for it. You'll find it. And then Tim and I have a podcast of our own, the Gilbert and Busfield podcast. And we've got a new episode going up soon. And we're actually in these offices now because we have high-speed internet, so we can set up our camera and start shooting things and interacting with our listeners and viewers and putting up videos that we do because we're crazy people. What else do I have to plug?
I was going to ask you about the podcast. It is because you guys were doing some and then you took a break and then you came back. It's very fun. I recommend. It's like a very fun, lighthearted, fun. Like, I want you guys to be my friends or my parents. Like, it's very like two entertainers who are very entertaining, who have a lot of stories, being like very real with each other.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, we just kind of hang out and shoot the shit, and that's how we do it. It depends on what's going on that day. We can get a little opinionated when it comes to the political spectrum, but we try and put that aside and be as entertaining as we can and as informative as we can. And right now, our big push, and I think it should be everyone's big push, and you're going to hear us if you listen to our podcast talk about this all the time. Go vote. Vote, vote, vote. Get your ballots early. Ask for an absentee ballot and vote, 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 vote. Nothing's more important.
Yeah. So where they can go subscribe on Apple Podcasts, but you mentioned videos, like where would they find that?
We don't have any of that up yet. We're still trying to find our way. So our producer, Josh Kearns, we actually have a Zoom meeting with him tomorrow to figure out the logistics of all of that. But you can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Libsyn. You can find us on, I don't know, we're sort of everywhere. For Gilbert and Busfield. And then we'll have messages and information, and we'll set up a website. We've started out rather small to see how we like it. Now we have a producer. Now we're growing. And so now we're going to have to bring in subscribers and try and monetize this thing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. If you like what you're hearing, listeners, subscribe and download, rate, smash that subscribe button, review. I've been doing this podcast for so many years, and I still stumble over the order of things to tell you to do. But all the things you can do with the podcast, do that and leave a comment that helps out the show. 5 stars. Listen to my other podcast, Childish, that I do with Greg Fitzsimmons. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Alison Rosen. I am on Patreon, patreon.com/Alison Rosen. And I'm also on Cameo. You're on Cameo too, right?
I am on the Cameo, and I'm on the Twitter and the Instagram and the Facebook. I have all the socials.
So go find all of us on all the socials. Thank you again. It was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you. It was great. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Me too.
Thank you. Stay sane.
You too. Listeners, thank you for listening. I love you. Goodbye.
Hey, do you know about the Alison Rosen Show?